The U.S., Israel, and Iran have agreed to a tentative 2-week ceasefire, but all sides have presented vastly different versions of the terms. AP reporters around the globe are taking a look at the ceasefire response in their regions and what it could mean for the future. In the U.S., the Trump administration is declaring victory.
Operation Epic Fury was a historic and overwhelming victory on the battlefield.
Here in Washington, President Donald Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth have been triumphant speaking about the ceasefire deal. Vice President J.D. Vance has been a bit more measured, calling it a fragile agreement, but it's still unclear what exactly the U.S. agreed to. There are large questions that remain about the free flow of traffic to the Strait of Hormuz, and President Trump's claims that the U.S. will help Iran dig out its buried enriched uranium. There are already concerns on Capitol Hill that the U.S. does get that material out of Iran.
But Iran is claiming victory as well and says the deal allows it to begin charging ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz.
Hardline voices within Iran are insisting that they have seized victory in the war with Israel and the United States. And that's in part because they now control the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow mouth of the Persian Gulf through which about 20% of all natural gas and oil traded passes in peacetime. And they are planning to try to institute a toll booth system that would upend decades of the strait being open for international traffic. They're also insisting that even though Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed by Israel at the start of the war, they've now replaced him with a younger, more hardline version in his son, Moshtaba.
Israelis are breathing a sigh of relief over the ceasefire, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the deal does not cover fighting against Hezbollah.
At the outset of this war, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu talked about removing the threat of Iran's ballistic missiles. He talked of destroying its nuclear program and ending its support for hostile proxy groups. Netanyahu and President Trump even raised the idea of regime change in Iran. Well, none of these goals appears to have been achieved. And in the case of the proxies, Israel is now locked in heavy fighting with Hezbollah militants in southern Lebanon and looking at an open-ended military occupation of the southern part of that country.
Before a ceasefire was announced, Trump had threatened destruction in Iran if it did not reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Asked again about Trump's threat to annihilate Iranian civilization, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt defended it as a, quote, very strong threat that led to results.
Yeah, baby, we are back, and we are black. Here on WLTH 1370 AM, that's 92.7 in the FM dial. If you're nasty, folks, it is 6:38 in the PM on April the 10th, 2026. The future's here, and the future is now. And the future, I don't know, man, judging by these gas stations, these gas prices, I don't know if the future's looking so great at this point. But anyway, we did get some heartening news on April 7th, a few days ago, when a temporary ceasefire was agreed between the United States, Israel, and Iran. It was supposed to be 2 weeks. Supposed, I say supposed. It involved Iran and the United States directly, with Israel loosely aligned. It was brokered by Pakistan at the last minute to stop an escalation. The U.S. agreed to halt strikes on Iran. Iran signaled that it would stop defensive operations if attacks ceased. Iran also agreed to reopen or allow limited shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that is important because this waterway is responsible for 20% of the world's global oil supply. Yeah. You want to know why we've been paying $4 for gas? Well, I'm about to go pay $4 and some change for gas when I leave here. Yeah, that's why. Iran still claims control over access and may impose conditions or fees, which they have. Like, just goes to show you once again how ridiculous this whole thing has been. Iran has complete control of the Strait of Hormuz right now. They are charging basically countries that aren't affiliated with us to be able to move oil through the strait at a fee. So now Iran is caking, like literally caking cake on top of cake on top of cake. Seriously, Iran is making a lot of money right now off the strength. They are richer than ever, and they're going to be able to reload those sort of lightweight drones that they've been using to blow up all of our ships and send death and destruction into Israel, which is, completely counterproductive to the motives of what Trump and other people said. Now, both sides agreed to enter talks during the ceasefire window. The U.S. demanded ending uranium enrichment and dismantling the missile program and stop backing region militias. Iran demanded sanctions relief, troop withdrawals, and keeping enrichment rights. Israel, who all this is about in reality, said they supported the ceasefire in principle, but immediately continued their military operations, especially against Hezbollah. Here we go, loop-de-loo. Here we go, Hezbollah. In Lebanon. So, according to the U.S. and Israel, Lebanon fighting is separate from the ceasefire that they have with Iran. But Iran says, wait a minute. And the Pakistani prime minister who negotiated the ceasefire said, when he announced the ceasefire was done, he said Lebanon was part of the practice. So once again, we have a scenario in which Israel is breaking, once again, another ceasefire, which they've broken over 2,000 over the years. Yeah. So this ceasefire is pretty non-existent at this point, it seems. Iran is accusing the U.S. and Israel of violation by continuing to strike Lebanon. And good Lord, we are completely destroying the civilian. Israel is completely destroying the civilian areas of Lebanon and Beirut, one of the great cities of the Middle East. It looks like 9/11, and then some in some of those buildings. They are striking civilian areas, not military areas. They are killing civilians on purpose. Now, it is important to state that in 1982, Menachem Begin, who was the prime minister of Israel then, started bombing Beirut. Ronald Reagan, history's greatest monster, Ronald Reagan. I'm no fan of Ronald Reagan. I've done segments on this show about why he's one of the worst humans ever, okay? Ronald Reagan called Menachem Begin on the phone and said, stop it. You're committing a genocide in Beirut. And within 40 minutes, Israel had to stop bombing. 40 minutes. Which is how you know that Joe Biden, when he was in office, and now Donald Trump, that he's in office, these people have had no real intention to stop the genocide of people in Gaza or now in Lebanon. You see it. If they wanted to stop it, they could. Now, at the time when the ceasefire was announced, oil prices dropped sharply and global markets rallied. But again, almost immediately, Israel broke the treaty. And, they are saying, look, we're ready to resume the war at any moment, as if they ever stopped. As if they stopped. And in retaliation, Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz. Once again. So now we probably should be getting prepared to pay at least $4 or $5 for gas for the near future. Keeping it 100. Gas is probably not going to be down anytime soon. Even if we just stopped bombing, even if this was resolved immediately, there would still be massive damage done to so much of the oil production in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf states. This is already caused immense damage that we as a country, the United States, may never recover from. And, ultimately this was always Israel's plan all along. They don't want peace. They talk openly about the Greater Israel Project. The Greater Israel Project is Israelis' intention to essentially seize all the land from Iran, from Lebanon, from Jordan, Syria, and Saudi Arabia, and basically become a world power, the world power, the preeminent world power. And our politicians are helping them genocide their neighbors and steal as much land as possible. This is what they're doing. And so some of the details of the supposed ceasefire included the 10-point plan that came from Iran. This is what they said that they forced the U.S. to accept, which was a commitment to non-aggression, Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz. Well, ding, 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 we got that regardless. Acceptance of Iran's uranium enrichment, lifting of all primary sanctions, lifting of all secondary sanctions, termination of all UN Security Council resolutions, termination of all Board of Governors resolutions, paying compensation to Iran and withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the region, and cessation of war on all fronts, including Lebanon. I think a lot of people, and we're seeing a lot of foreign policy experts talk about this, including people like Trita Parsi and others. Like I said, I don't listen to the corporate mainstream media. I stay away from it. It is poison for the most part, especially now that you have people like Larry Ellison, who controls a huge swath of American media like CNN and CBS. So you get a lot of Zionist propaganda. But a lot of foreign policy experts are talking about how Iran now is a world power. Like they have come into the money with their toll booth system in the Strait of Hormuz. They are being enriched beyond belief. And who else is benefiting from this? Russia. Russia is benefiting from it. Everybody we say we want to hurt, this war has actually enriched them, because now we've had to actually take resources away from Ukraine that we were using because we're being depleted. We're being fully depleted by this and overstretching the empire. And we're having to take stuff that was in Ukraine and stuff that was protecting Taiwan in the South China Sea and move it to the Middle East so that we can do this war. And so now Russia is caking because they're a great oil producer. Iran is caking because they're a great oil producer. And we're getting weaker by the day because people are running in droves away from the petrodollar, which is the only reason why we had all this power in the first place financially to do what the hell we wanted. Iran is demanding payment in crypto. They want crypto. They don't want US dollars. They want crypto. And they're controlling 20% of the world's oil. And so I think a lot of this is really making it more evident that it might be time. I think Donald Trump's time in office is coming to an end. I think he knows he's probably going to be impeached, or they're going to invoke the 25th Amendment against him. I actually think that might be part of the plan by people like J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel and these other people. I think if you notice, a lot of Donald Trump's his biggest defenders, his biggest supporters for the last 10 years have all turned against him. Candace Owens, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, so many others have turned against Donald Trump from his own MAGA base. MAGA at this point is so hollowed out that virtually only people who are supporting Donald Trump now is the lowest of the low, the bottom of the barrel people. And it's, I always say that if you go back and look at where Trump was in 2016, and you look at some of the campaign promises that he made and some of the ideas he had, his campaign in 2016 was revolutionary, okay? I'm not saying that in a good way, but I'm just saying, or a bad way, I'm just saying it completely was a radicalizing event in American history. People will be studying the 2016 Trump movement for many years, hundreds of years in the future. He was drawing from left-wing bases, from right-wing bases. Trump as a political figure did better with minorities than any Republican had done in 60 years in 2020 and 2024. He brought MAHA with Robert Kennedy Jr. A lot of people who wanted to get dyes and hormones out of food and didn't trust Big Pharma and things. He got those people. Trump's political instincts, especially when he in the first few campaigns, was on point. Even if he himself may be a grifter, a shameless grifter, and a megalomaniacal and narcissist, malignant narcissist, and all that stuff, but his political instincts were always top notch, and he knew what Hillary Clinton's weak points were. He knew what Kamala Harris's weak points were. And it wasn't just that they're girls. No, he knew that they were representatives of the status quo, of the establishment. He knew that he could make anti-war arguments against Hillary Clinton, who had voted for the Iraq War. He threw George W. Bush under the bus. One of the, greatest moments ever at a primary event maybe I've ever seen, when Donald Trump insulted George W. Bush to his face and his brother, and called him a liar and said that he lied us into Iraq and all the stuff I'd been wanting Democrats to say for decades. Donald Trump was just sitting there saying it casually, dissing the Bushes to their face, dissing Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz and all these people to their faces. Like I've never seen anything like it. The Trump phenomenon will, go down in history as one of, history's greatest, errors and mistakes. And he'll go down in history as maybe the worst president ever, or at least in modern times. But if Trump had a modicum of integrity and honor, just a modicum, he had the ability to have possibly done big things. And one of the worst things about MAGA and what his movement has become is that he's completely squandered all of that. He's completely squandered all of that. He in 2016 he put bringing back Glass-Steagall on the Republican platform. That was a law in the 90s that Bill Clinton and his people got rid of. There used to be laws that kept commercial banks and investment banks separate, so you couldn't have Wall Street people gambling with grandma's retirement money. Well, Bill Clinton, another one of history's greatest monsters, got rid of that. And leftists have been screaming for years, we got to bring back Glass-Steagall. Donald Trump put it in the Republican platform. Like he had the political instincts to know that to steal from Bernie Sanders, to steal from, all these different entities to get ahead, and he's able to cobble together this weird coalition that is now completely broken apart. And I don't know what makes sense other than Israel has some compromising information on him. Period. I can't think of anything else other than that, because it can't just be money, because a lot of people have money. The Saudis have money. The Russians have money. The Chinese have money. The Chinese have real big money, and they own a lot of our debt. Lots of people have money. All the Gulf states have money. Israel ain't the only people with money. Israeli, it's got to be something that is so bad. So bad. And I've covered the Epstein files extensively. But that's really the only thing that explains the self-destructive things that Donald Trump has started to do over the last year or so. Things that will ensure that he will go down in history as one of the most hated people who ever lived. I mean, he already was, but good Lord. He's not, don't get me wrong, he's enriched himself a lot. But mean, a lot of this might end in tribunals. We might end up in a world where people like Pete Hegseth and Pam Bondi and Kash Patel end up being let off in handcuffs somewhere. This is getting ugly. The things they've been willing to do and ways they've been willing to beclown themselves to distract from the Epstein files leads me to think that there has to be something so bad that Donald Trump was willing to do something that no other American president was willing to do, which is completely destroy their legacy and destroy whatever little credibility America had on the world stage with this Iran war. Like, nobody else was willing to do it. Iran's been trying to get this war for 30 years. Every president told him no. Bill Clinton told him no. George W. Bush told him no. Obama told him no. Joe Biden told him no. Donald Trump told him no. Donald Trump spoke extensively about why going to war with Iran was such a bad idea before he became president, and even once he'd been president. All of a sudden, it's a good idea? Yeah, they've got something on him. And let me just say this before we go to a break. One of the most irresponsible things about all this is from the Democratic Party, who can't even pretend to be a adversarial party. Their only argument is that they don't like how Trump has done this. They're not arguing that this is a bad idea. Oh no, this isn't, starting a war with one of the biggest powers in the Middle East that has 100 million people, heavily mountainous terrain, and millions of people willing to die. No, that's not the problem. The problem is that Trump just didn't do it right. And so this is Democratic Representative Josh Gottenheimer, who's been called the future of the Democratic Party by some people. And this guy just completely beclowns himself in his inability to just admit the obvious. Going to war with Iran was always a bad idea. It was always going to be a bad idea. But this is what he had to say.
Enemy of our country, and very close allies with our other enemies, China and Russia and North Korea. I know that they are dangerously close to having a nuclear weapon, and that's unacceptable. I know that their missile program advanced significantly. I know that their drone program advanced significantly. I know that that poses a massive threat. Their terror program has advanced massively, and I know they're a major threat to the United States of America. And so knowing that, this is not about Donald Trump or anybody else. This is about standing up.
I mean, he's the president. You think you think the Iranian mullahs are a greater threat to the American people than Donald Trump getting us into this war? You think the Iranian mullahs are a greater threat? You are more scared of them?
The Iranian government has posed a massive threat to the United States. Do I think that Donald Trump has handled this well? Back to the thing we were talking about? No, obviously not, and I said that.
Yeah, obviously not. So why would we trust him to do something if we know he isn't going to handle it well? Well, this is a very high-stakes situation. I don't think anybody, the Strait of Hormuz has now been closed.
We've got the best general, because it's not just Donald Trump that runs this. We've got the best generals in the world, and the best military in the world, the best intelligence in the world, the best intelligence community.
I mean, but our generals are not the ones that are bleeding out. A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. That's the president. That's their boss.
Yes, but okay, but fine.
So why would you? So yeah, it's absurd. Why would you let a guy that would tweet that be in charge of a war where American lives are at risk?
Well, because who's going to be? We have a commander in chief. That's his job. What do you want?
Yeah, to oppose him, I think. To say that as a Democratic representative, you do not think that an unhinged commander in chief should be getting us into a war where he's promising genocide in Iran.
That's the reason why I opposed it. Why I supported the War Powers Resolution a couple weeks ago, because I opposed it. I made it very clear. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to support our servicemen and women. It doesn't mean I'm not going to back.
So instead of just saying the Iran war was a bad idea, and it's always been a bad idea, and it was always going to be a bad idea, we get this piecing and parsing. This is why I always talk about the Democrats not being a real adversarial party. Remember, during Donald Trump's first term, the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, all of them voted to give Donald Trump and Jeff Sessions more spying power over the American people. These are people who are going on TV on a regular basis saying Donald Trump is owned by Vladimir Putin and Vladimir Putin's got something on Donald Trump and whatever. These people kept giving him expanded power. And now they're giving him expanded war power and saying, well, you know what? It's just the way he's doing it. He should have asked Congress first before he decided to, you know, completely destroy America's reputation and financial standing across the world. This is why they're not the answer. This is why these people are not the answer. They are not a serious party at all. I'm sorry. We need, and taco, the whole taco thing, like, that literally is one of the most idiotic, asinine things I've ever seen, where the Democrats always talking about, oh, well, Trump's gonna taco. Why would you? Well, let me just say, TACO stands for Trump always chickens out. It's an acronym. Trump always chickens out. Why would you taunt a man who is obviously mentally unstable or something? He's either mentally in decline or mentally unstable, who, again, we should be talking about getting up out of there with the 25th Amendment, a man who's a malignant narcissist, a man who is arrogant and, you know, has a God complex that you wouldn't believe. Why would you want him to not chicken out? Why would you taunt him with the idea that he's chickening out? Trump chickening out is what we should be wanting, because that means we don't get a nuclear war that could kill hundreds of millions, hell, maybe billions of people. I'm always glad when Trump chickens out. He should. I hope he chickens out. Please, chicken out more. But again, the Democratic Party, not a serious party, not a real party. You know, we have to start making some inroads in some other ways. You know, I always vote third party, generally speaking. But I genuinely don't know exactly what to do, because the Democrats are not serious. They're not an anti-war party. They're not even really anti-Trump, really. They're letting him destroy the Middle East and destroy our country's economic system and everything else just because it benefits them politically. Like, it's like ridiculous. It really is. And, you know, before we go to a break, I got some breaking news. Israel has assassinated Kamal Karzai, who was a diplomat. He was one of the people negotiating the ceasefire. And so they just killed an elderly diplomat and his wife because he was working on a peace effort to stop the war. And so this is what Israel and the United States has been doing. This is what we've been doing for a long time now. They don't want peace, folks. And we're going to taunt people for chickening out. That doesn't make any sense. All right, folks. Very serious first hour. So how about some happy happies? I can dig it. We'll be right back after these here on Straight Outta Cannon with me, Scott Cannon.